right, now I want to hit the same approach of writing from the negative perspective. What are common pitfalls that people make or fall into, and how do you avoid those? Your goal is to write a good letter. If you try to write the perfect letter, you will never get there. Right? You should not have as your goal writing the absolute awe-inspiring, it's going to bring the angels from the heavens and convince all of your readers. That's not going to happen in a letter to the editor. Right? So there are many possible ways you could write any given letter. So pick one that's good, that works for you, and go for it. Make arguments, not assertions. You want to back up, you want to summarize your point and back it up by citing some evidence, by drawing a nice analogy, by making some sort of argument to back up your claim. Generally avoid heated rhetoric. Your facts and arguments should speak for you. You don't want to throw in a bunch of flowery language, a bunch of overheated rhetoric, calling people a bunch of names. For one thing, it distracts from your point. Right? You want people to focus on your arguments and the evidence. You want to persuade them. You don't want to convince people you're angry. They probably know that already because you wrote a letter. You want to convince them that you have some argument for your position. Your primary focus should be clarity, making it cogent. Don't try to be, some people can be too clever for their own good. It's fine to be clever. It's fine to have a clever turn of phrase, but that should be secondary. Often that will get in the way of making your primary point. A related issue, focus on the issue at hand, not you. The reader doesn't care about you. Now, sometimes a personal anecdote can be very effective. For instance, if you work in healthcare, you might know a story or have personal experience that relates to that. If personal information serves your argument, then go ahead and use it. But what I'm saying is don't make gratuitous references to yourself, because all it does is convince the reader that you're more interested in talking about yourself than talking about the issue, which you don't want to give that impression. Avoid long-windedness. Keep it as short as possible. We will talk about this at length as we cover some of the particular letters. Really, you want to keep letters very, very short as possible. Don't stray from the publication's guidelines. Look them up. The publication often will tell you what their guidelines are. The Denver Post says flat out they will accept up to 150 words. Don't submit 250 words. So if they don't tell you the word count, you can look at some recent letters that they published to get an idea of the range that they're looking for. So keep it in the range that they're actually publishing. Finally, or the next point is, don't submit your piece to multiple newspapers. This is almost always a bad idea, unless you're, say, a congressman or the president. None of us here is. Submit it, pick your paper, pick your target, and fire at that target. If you try to fire at 10 targets at once, you're going to miss them all. And if you do, if two papers happen to publish you and they have overlapping print readership, they might be irritated by the fact that you sent them a non-exclusive letter, and you might get blackballed from publishing subsequent letters in the paper. Now, the traditional advice is you can submit a letter to publications in different regions. But I think that that's generally, especially in today's internet age, generally a bad idea. For one thing, you're generally responding to something in a particular publication, so target it to that publication. And given that most publications are printing them online, there's no reason to submit it to multiple papers. I mean, pick one publication, increase your chances of getting in there, and don't worry about other publications at that time. You can submit a different letter to a different publication at a different point. So the final point on this subsection is don't harangue the editor. You don't want to call them up every 2 hours saying, hey, did you get my letter? Are you going to publish it, right? Editors are busy. They're often behind, especially in today's period of layoffs at many papers. So I thought a couple of analogies might help. If you're going fishing, what do? You bait up your hook, you throw it in the lake, and you sit quietly and you wait. You don't dance around and throw rocks in the lake, right? That's not an effective way of catching fish. You've also heard the old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Sometimes that's true, and sometimes the squeaky wheel gets taken off and thrown in the dumpster heap. So you can be a little bit squeaky. If you haven't heard in a few days, you might say, look, is my letter still under consideration? Did it come through okay, etc. But don't be annoying, or you won't get published that time, and you won't get published ever if the editor puts you on their naughty list. All right, so now you've sent in your letter, you've done all the right things, you've written it well, you had it edited. What do you do after publication? Well, you're not going to get every letter you write published. If it doesn't get published, you might put it on your blog. This is a great thing to do. If you have a blog, put your letter on the blog and with a nice polite note saying that it was not published in the paper in question. But if it is published, one thing, just bask in your achievement. Take a few minutes to recognize your achievement and to appreciate the fact that you took a real action in support of liberty. Promote it. If you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitter, promote your letter. Make sure you have as wide a readership as you can manage. And then, of course, look for your next opportunity, consistent with the guidelines of a publication in question. And then remember the value of the letter. Our goal is to change the world, not all at once with one letter, but to change the world slowly, one active mind at a time, one step of activism at a time.